So, if you have been thinking about adding group coaching calls as a feature on your online course or your membership sites, I think that that's a really good idea. It's a good avenue to have a touch base with your students, just ask for their feedback, follow up with them, and at the same time supplement their learning. Now, the question here really is, how do you exactly structure them for maximum impact? How do you have these 1 hour group coaching calls and sessions with them where they're really going to get a lot of value from? Now, in this video, we're going to be answering that very question, and I encourage you to stay till the end so that I can answer your burning questions as to how to maneuver the common obstacles when it comes to group coaching calls. So, without further ado, let's dive right in. So, how do I structure my group coaching calls? I divide the 1 hour session into 8 different segments. That seems to be quite a lot, but that's how I kind of like manage my time. And that's also the reasons why sometimes my group coaching calls go beyond 1 hour. But it's also a very flexible structure. You can shorten each segment for as short as you like, as long as you just get everything covered. But some segments are actually my personal preference, so just listen up and take everything with a grain of salt. If you wish to include that very segment in your group coaching calls, that's awesome. If not, that's okay too. So the first segment is what we call introduction. Most especially, I have different students coming in every 2 weeks. So my student base always gets refreshed, and every single time I have a group coaching call, there's always going to be a new student coming inside the GCC, and I want as much as possible for them to feel homey. And so I introduce myself to them, I greet them, and generally just have an opening salvo of how you want your GCC to be open. So sometimes I go along the lines of, "Hi, my name is Demi Bernice. If you're new here, welcome to your very first group coaching call. If you have been with me for quite some time, that is awesome. I'm glad that you are present today." And then you go on to the next part of the sentence. I make this very short and very sweet because most of them, they already really know me because, of course, they have bought the membership site or the course. So I don't really need to have like a long ass introduction. Okay. The next segment is what I call house rules. So when it comes to talking about house rules, these are basically the virtual meeting etiquettes that I mention consistently with the people inside my GCCs. So what does that look like? I would say something along the lines of, "Hi, make sure that you are muting yourselves upon entry. If you wish to say something, you can comment it. Or if you wish to be able to talk to me personally, you can raise your virtual hand." So there are virtual hands, the emojis on Zoom and on Google Meet. They can click that, and then that would alert on my screen, and then I would be able to recognize that they have a question. Because sometimes if you just raise your hand like that on a camera, it's very easy to miss, most especially if you have a lot of people inside a group coaching call. So as much as possible, I'd really like for them to raise their virtual hand. So those are a couple of the group or house rules when it comes to your group coaching calls. If there are anything that you wish to add, just the usual etiquette, like turn on your camera. I'd love to be able to see your faces. So in that very sense, it actually depends who I'm talking to. If my students are online course creators or aspiring online course creators, I really teach them to like turn on your camera every single time you have group coaching calls so that they can understand and be familiar with the feeling that someone is staring at them every single time. But if my students are freelancers in the group coaching call, I don't really require it for them as much because I have plenty of freelancer students who are very much introverted, and I feel like at the same time that they are having a group coaching call with me, they're also working on the sides. So that is why I don't really require it for them. So it really depends on how you wish your house rules to be like. And it's also very short and simple. This is something that you can just, cover in like 1 to 2 minutes. The third one is announcements. So if you have been with that group of students for quite some time, like for example, I have a course with a 5-month long cohort, and then I use that very segment to tell them, hey, this is the updates with your module. These resources are now available inside your members portal. All these things can be put in the announcements so that you make sure that all of these, teacher obligations that you have with your students are being settled prior to you having a deep dive discussion. Next one is the breakout room sessions. What I love about breakout room sessions is that it gives me some space as a teacher or as an online course creator to just simply facilitate the discussion that is happening in between my students. So far, I don't think I have used the breakout room feature in Google Meet, but I have used it in Zoom quite a number of times, and I think that's one of the best features that we have on online meeting apps. And what it does is that it asks you to divide the group coaching call members into smaller groups, and they would have their very own small meeting rooms in that very meeting that you just set. So you don't see all or the entirety of those rooms, but they're actually getting divided. And then once you close the breakout room session, and you cancel it, they actually go back to the main meeting room, which is the one that you set. So it's a very nice feature, and it allows for your students to have a conversation with their fellow classmates. And that's something that I really love, because in most of the group coaching call sessions, you don't really get to have these different groups talk to each other, have your students talk. So it forces them to introduce themselves and have conversations with their other classmates, because it's definitely crucial. Your students are not only going to be able to get knowledge and ideas from you, but at the same time, they're also going to get knowledge and nuggets of wisdom from their classmates. So it's like you have many coaches also helping you with the mission of instilling and supplementing the learning in that very GCC. So that's awesome. So at the same time, during those breakout room sessions, there is actually this thing that I call the magic question. So I just coined the term. It's not really necessary that you're going to be calling it the same thing, but before I divide them into breakout rooms, I pose a question that is very related to the deep dive discussion that I'm going to have later. And the use of that is because if you're going to open the breakout rooms without them having to discuss something, what usually happens is they just stare at each other, most especially if the breakout room that they have entered in is a room that is full of introverts. Like, you could only imagine, like, no one's talking about anything, they're just staring at each other, staring at the camera, and everyone's silent. So you might want to have a question to pose before you open a breakout room. And then after that, when you close the breakout room session, then you ask each group to share what they have discussed in their mini rooms. So sometimes I call people by volunteer. Sometimes if I have seen that that very group took a while in order to get to the main group, they are usually the ones that I call, because I felt like their discussion was very fruitful and they have a lot of things to share. So in Zoom, you actually get to see the names of the people and which room were they dispersed to. So for example, my name is Demi and I was dispersed through room 4. You're able to see that as a mini window on Zoom, which I think is a really good feature. And at the same time, you get to see who turned on their camera, who is speaking at that very moment, who did not say anything at all. Like, you would be able to see that in the mini pop-up box in Zoom, which I think is very helpful as an online course creator, as a coach, right? And then after that, we move on to the next segment of our group coaching call, which is the personal sharing. So what does that mean? It means that whatever question that I have posed to them, I will be the first one to share my very own experience and my very own answer towards that very question that I just posed. And then I answer that very question, I tell them stories, all these things. And then after that, I will call the group of people that I think had a very fruitful discussion. And then I ask them to share what they have shared in their breakout room to the main room or to all of us. And then I ask follow-up questions to the sharer. Sometimes I also become a lot more interested in their discussion, that sometimes it becomes a very long conversation, but I always am very conscious of the time. So as much as possible, I really want my GCCs to just be 1 hour. So if I'm curious, well, if I really am curious, then I'll email them later. But if not, then yeah, I can just dismiss the discussion and cut it short. So that is personal sharing. After the personal sharing and then the group sharing that I just mentioned, the next one is diving into the main discussion. So whatever the main discussion is, it really depends on you. It's not necessary that you're going to quiz your students with whatever they have learned from the module, most especially if your lessons are self-paced. You don't want to put a pressure on them to like, hey, you really need to like watch module 1 before you attend these weeks group coaching calls. I really am not like that. I give them the freedom to be able to open the modules and lessons with their own time. But I do require them to come to the group coaching calls just because I feel like that's a very important part of learning. They get to learn more things. They get to connect with other people in their community. And I think that supplements their learning really, really well. So there are 2 ways that you can structure your main group discussion. Number 1, you can pick a lesson in your module, like what I mentioned, in your pre-recorded lessons and summarize it. So that's a good way for people who was not able to open the lessons yet to already have that very learning. And at the same time, for those who were able to open the lessons already, then you reiterate that very knowledge to them and that becomes their review. Now, I don't like to do that part because, again, it creates a pressure to the student that they really need to be doing this before they enter the group coaching call, which decreases the number of my students entering the group coaching calls. So I don't give them any pressure. If I go to the group coaching calls and just show up for them, I want them to also just show up, okay? Like no pressure. We're just going to be discussing things here. We're going to have a community moment. That's it. So what I'd like to do is the option number 2, which is I actually add lessons that are not in the pre-recorded lessons. Okay, so what are those lessons? Sometimes it's about personal development, sometimes it's about taxes, government, all these things that is very related to their entire life as a freelancer or as an online course creator. Like, what are these things that is outside of the niche of that very course or membership site that they have enrolled on? I add personal development stuff, productivity, books that they might want to read, stories, all these things, discussions that can help supplement their learning that they have not learned from the lessons. Because I think that's very important. It allows you as a coach, as an online course creator, to have a holistic learning for your students. So super, super important. Love that. And then after that, the last segment of the group coaching call is, of course, the Q&A. If they have questions about the discussion, about the group sharing, or just anything at all that is, boggling them, they feel like they have been bothered by it in the past few days, I ask them to ask questions, okay? And sometimes there are students that are very inquisitive that would really use that moment to ask you plenty of questions. I have a couple of students on the top of my head that I could remember correctly that would just really go into the GCCs and don't really care about the group sharing, all these things, but they really love the question and answer portion because that is the time they get to ask you unlimited number of questions, as long as, of course, it is within your time frame. So That's one of the things that I love, is that you give your students more freedom to be able to reach out to you and just ask you questions and just learn other things aside from the things that they have learned in the lessons. So all these things can definitely help create maximum impact for your group coaching calls. Now, before we end this video, there are a couple of questions that I always get from my online course creator students, and I'd like to be able to answer them because I feel like you have been asking this question as well. So let's dive into that. So the very first question is, what if in the Q&A segment, there is a student that's going to ask me a question that I don't know how to answer? Well, that's a very common one. It's not always that you're going to be answering your students' questions. You're not. It's very impossible that even if you have learned your subject matter like at the back of your hand, there will always be a student that would think further steps ahead and would be able to ask that question that you don't know the answer to. And that's completely fine. It doesn't really make you less of an online coach. So what I suggest is that if you come across a student that's like that, I would tell the student that, hey, I currently don't know the answer to that very question, but I find that very interesting. How about I spend the next weekend just researching all about this, and then we come back to the next group coaching call, and I'll be able to answer your question. Or you can also reply to them via email on whatever you have researched on. So that's it. You don't really need to feel bad because you were not able to answer your students' questions. That's completely fine. We are not walking dictionaries, or we are not walking encyclopedias. So, encyclopedia, that is so weird. Is there any Gen Z in the group that don't even recognize encyclopedias? That's so weird. I don't know why I thought about that. Uh, okay, next question. What if my group coaching call is filled with introverted students that would not like to ask questions or would not want to participate in a breakout room session? Well, when it comes to the breakout rooms, they're actually being forced to interact with one another, which I really like. A lot of my students are introverts, and then I just find them, talking inside these breakout room sessions. And that's a good thing. But if they do not like to participate, that's completely fine as well. Sometimes your people have the option to not join the meeting room or the breakout room sessions. Okay, so there is actually a button that says join. When you open the breakout room, it flashes in their screen. Click to join the breakout room session. And then there's a join button, and they can actually opt not to join. Okay, so that's one. I found that some students are just too busy to be able to join the group coaching call. Sometimes they're doing something on the side, so I understand that. But if they're true introverted, they also don't join the group coaching calls, which is completely fine as well. Or they join, but they don't say anything. And at that very point, it's not my problem anymore. It's the problem of the group inside the mini room. So it's a fun way to be able to force them to interact. But when it comes to question and answer portions, you would really have batches of students in group coaching calls wherein some people would not really ask a question. What I do here is that I just think about things that they could possibly ask. So I always think, okay, no one is asking me a question right now, but if I was in their shoes, according to our discussion and our group sharings, what are the things that I feel like they should be asking, right? So I pick out those questions in my head. I've only had a very few group coaching calls where my students were super talkative and very inquisitive, and most of the time, and they really are shy. They just ask questions by the comments, which is also nice. You give them the option to write their questions in the comments or in the chat, so that you can just read it to the group and then answer that very question if they're too shy to like turn on their camera, turn on their microphone, and ask the question. Next question, what if only a few students will attend the group coaching calls? Now, most especially in my case where I don't really require my students to join the GCCs, well, there are a couple of times where the GCCs was only filled with like 4 people, including me. Or sometimes it's just 2 people, including me. And what I do is that I just maximize that very experience for the people who has joined. That doesn't mean that you're going to dissolve the group coaching call and just quit. And you're like, hey, there's not enough people in this group coaching call. We're not going to continue this. I'll see you in the next one. That should not happen. Okay, so if you have at the very least one person showed up, that's already a good number for you to start discussing what you need to discuss. Make that a one-on-one coaching with them rather than expecting for the entire group to show up before you create a class. Last question, do I always need to record all my coaching classes, and when should I stop recording? That's a really good question, and I also get asked about that a lot. My rule when it comes to group coaching call recordings is that my students, before they enter the group coaching call, they already know that that class is going to be recorded. That's also some of the reasons why some people don't really ask questions or don't participate, because they know that the thing is recorded and it can be viewed a few years later. To me, I just give them the orientation and expectation before the GCC even happens that the meeting is recorded. It is for their classmates who are not able to attend the group coaching calls, and at the same time, if they want to go back to the specific information that was discussed in the GCCs, then of course the recording is also going to be very, very helpful. So I tell them in advance, and I stop recording when there are some confidential stuff that is being covered in the group coaching calls. For example, there was one time where I think we talked about family and relationships inside the group coaching call and how that affects to you as a freelancer. I think that was one of my magic questions in the breakout room sessions. And there was a person in the GCC that just cried her heart out because, she has her own issues with her family and etc. And I stopped recording the video then. I told my students in the description of that recording that this coaching call was cut short because there were some confidential and exclusive matters that happened with one of the participants, and I would not like to record further. But that is a very rare case. I think that's only happened to me once in hundreds of group coaching calls that I was able to create over the years. So yeah. You don't really need to stop recording, because as a facilitator, you also get to maneuver where the discussion is going. So this is something that you could train yourself over time. It doesn't really need to happen in a snap of a finger. So when you facilitate the questions and when you answer people's questions, when you allow them to share their stories, there are certain instances where you really need to cut someone and shift the question to somewhere else because it's starting to become more confidential, and we will always have students that are oversharers. And so it takes practice, but then you also understand that it's part of maneuvering how your group coaching calls are being set. So yeah, you're going to learn more about that as you do more group coaching calls anyway, so don't worry about it. Okay, so there you have it, guys. I hope that that has been a very detailed video of how you should be conducting your group coaching calls, and I hope that that helped you imagine how much of an impact that's going to give you and your students, how much supplemental learning you're going to be able to give them if you conduct group coaching calls in your online classes and in your membership site. So there you have it, guys. Thank you so much, and I'll see you in the next one.